Great to be with both of you.
So there's a lot talking about. I guess we'll just talk about what happened internationally since we're coming out of Liz's story as well. Your thoughts on what's going on right there with NATO, our allies, and also this meeting with Theresa May?
Well, the president gives the back of his hand to our closest allies, our strongest allies, and seems to embrace authoritarian figures. When he goes to NATO, which is the significant security architecture of our country in a transatlantic alliance, and disrupts it, when he basically, in essence, calls for changing the Prime Minister of Great Britain as he's visiting her in his comments to one of the British newspapers, and when he says that his upcoming meeting with Putin is maybe the easiest one he'll have, well, someone who tried to undo our democracy through cyber attacks, someone who is, in my view, a thug, someone who the president calls a competitor, I call a foe, that shouldn't be a chummy or easy meeting whatsoever. So I really worry, as a senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, what the president is doing in our foreign policy.
Well, Senator, nobody really from NATO has come out and said, this was a disaster, you know, our friendship is on the line here. They may be frustrated, but that's what negotiations are, you know, all about.
Well, this isn't about negotiations. The reality is well, all of these countries...
ponying up to everybody, you know, doing their fair share.
All of these... Here's the thing. The president is great at misdirection. There is no NATO country who's in arrears. None. Zero. There is a goal to, in 2024, hit that 2% target. 8 of the NATO countries are actually going to meet it this year in 2018. So the reality is that Putin loves to disrupt the West. He made a great investment in the elections of 2016 when he helped Donald Trump, according to all of our intelligence agencies. And so at the end of the day, what Putin can't do through all of his cyber attacks and trolling and Twitter misinformation, the president is helping him in creating a disruption in the West.
But the president did say that he is going to ask you know, Putin about those questions directly about what happened regarding, you know, them interfering with our elections. And also, a lot of people are saying what he brought up to the British Prime Minister regarding the pipeline is something that the Obama administration has also brought up, saying that, you know what, if you're paying the Russians this way, well, why don't you pay up and pony up the other way? So it's not something that is completely foreign to just President Trump.
Well, first of all, Germany is our biggest ally when it comes to sanctions against Russia, and I wouldn't be asking Putin about his cyber attacks when all of the president's own intelligence agencies, when the bipartisan committee, the Senate Intelligence, said that Putin interfered in our elections and did it on behalf of, did it in support of the president. I wouldn't be asking him. I would be telling him, knock it off, and here's the consequences if you continue to engage, as our intelligence agencies are saying in this election cycle, Russia is engaging.
All right, let's talk about the Supreme Court nominee, Justice Brett Kavanaugh. It seems like you've already made up your mind about him without even going through a vetting process. Why is that, Senator?
Well, I've seen what Judge Kavanaugh's record is. First of all, he comes off the Heritage Foundation's list. The Heritage Foundation opposes a woman's right to make her own decisions on reproductive health, permits greater gun freedom in our country instead of reasonable gun safety laws, ultimately wants to eliminate the Affordable Care Act that bought 1 million New Jerseyans health insurance who didn't have it before, and for 3.8 million New Jerseyans who have pre-existing conditions, meaning they had an illness before that previously excluded them from getting health insurance.
But we really haven't heard from the justice about where he really stands, and especially on Roe versus Wade. I mean, it's very murky, his stance on that.
Rosanna, his decisions already as a D.C. appeal courts judge gives me plenty of insight as to where he's headed. He even says that the President of the United States can determine what laws are constitutional or not, and therefore disobey a law if he believes it's unconstitutional. That's what the courts are about, not what the executive branch is about. So this may have been President Trump's get-out-of-jail card. with this nomination, but the reality is it's really concerning to me that he doesn't understand the difference between what the executive branch powers are and the judicial branch and the legislative branch. His decisions what's at stake here is a generational imprint on the Supreme Court. The decisions that the court will render on health care, on women's reproductive rights, on voting rights, on civil rights, and LGBTQ rights are at stake here. So this is a big deal.
But a lot of Democrats are saying that's what they said about Justice Kennedy, and Justice Kennedy ended up being really very much his own thinker and really being a sort of a free thinker, and the swing vote when it came to the justices and what happened on the Supreme Court. So a lot of Republicans are saying that the Democrats aren't really giving him a fair share by saying exactly what you just did.
Well, first of all, let me just say President Trump has made it very clear, both as a candidate and as president, he will only support pro-life judges.
Well, if we had Hillary Clinton, she would have supported, obviously, the other way. That's what they do.
He said he will never permit a judge to be on the court that would make the mistake Justice Roberts made, which meant upholding the Affordable Care Act that brought millions of people in this country health care. So at the end of the day, I just simply don't believe. If you listen, we're going to quote Republicans, let's quote the Republican leader of the Senate who said we shouldn't have a decision in the midst of an election on the Supreme Court. Well, then let's follow that rule now. Let the people speak about who is going to vote on the Supreme Court justice in the United States Senate and hold this nomination next year.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your election. You're up for re-election. It looks like it's going to be a nasty one. Are you ready for this?
Well, listen, I've never backed down on a fight for the people of New Jersey, whether that's standing up to the president on the Gateway Tunnel, trying to create 2 new Trans-Hudson tunnels, incredible. Important for our economy, standing up to big oil when they want to drill off the shore of New Jersey and affect our beautiful shoreline, standing up to the NRA who wants to expand gun rights instead of have reasonable gun safety laws and eliminate assault weapons. So I'm ready for this. My opponent is a greedy farmer executive who made his fortune on the backs of cancer patients by gouging them. And in my mind, that's going to be a clear contrast.
He says that your ethics are up for grabs, that you are ethically challenged, and he's taken out a lot of ads that really
ads that he's done on the back of cancer patients. He raised that one drug that is so critical to those cancer patients by 200%. He had to settle a lawsuit with the government for $280 million for falsely promoting a drug that was not approved for the purposes that he was promoting it. He was raising cancer prices in terms of those drugs here and lowering them in Russia. Don't talk to me about ethics when it comes to that type of treatment of people who are facing a life and death decision as to whether they can afford that drug or not.
Senator, can we talk about the new website that you launched in response to exactly what you're saying, that basically is characterizing or trying to set the record straight about exactly what Bob Hugin did?
Yeah, sure. It's a website that just deals with the facts. You know, even President Trump, believe it or not, and his FDA commissioner have cited Bob Hugin's company as one that continuously stops the opportunity for generic drugs to come to the market to make it cheaper, as one of the worst offenders of violating the law in that regard, and consistently talks about his company as one that actually continues raises prices. So when the President of the United States of your own party, who, by the way, Bob Hugin was a delegate for Donald Trump, gave him enormous amounts of money to his campaign, was state treasurer in New Jersey. So at the end of the day, you can't tell me that you're Mr. Middle of the road when everything you've done is surround yourself with a Trump
presidency. Can I ask you this one last question regarding what happened to Joe Crowley here in New York? Is there a sense of fear that, you know what, New York, well, people in New Jersey are just sick and tired of exactly what's happening, the status quo, the back and forth, sort of the mud raking and the nastiness that's going on, and, you know, that there is going to be some sort of referendum possibly on exactly you and what has happened?
Well, look, at the end of the day, I'm going to talk about how we successfully fought offshore drilling and saved the Jersey Shore and its environment. I'm going to talk about how I helped create 1 million new coverage for insurance for people in New Jersey, including eliminating pre-existing condition discrimination for 3.8 million New Jerseyans. I'm going to talk about my autism legislation that became law in a state that has the highest rate of autism in the nation. I'm proud to go through all of that record and at the end of the day, let New Jerseyans decide. New Jerseyans decide that the stakes have never, that the stakes have never been higher in this election. People want a check and balance on this administration. Right now, Republicans have it all.
Man, it seems like being in politics is a tough job these days. Tougher than it's ever been.
It's a little tougher than cooking.